Hello, welcome to ONTIC's Connected Intelligence Podcast. I'm Fred Burton, ONTIC's Executive Director of Protective Intelligence. This podcast offers valuable insights and practical advice to help you navigate the complexities of modern corporate security shared by leaders and innovators in the field. Now, on to the discussion. Hi, I'm Fred Burton here today with Brad Thor. Brad is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of now 24 thrillers, including Deadfall, Backlash, one of the Suspense magazine's best books of the year, Spy Master, declared by the Washington Times as one of the all-time best thriller novels, The Last Patriot, Blowback, and The Lions of Lucerne. Known for the innovative plots and extensive knowledge of intelligence, special operations, and terrorist communities, Brad has appeared on Fox News, CNN, CNN Headline News, MSNBC, The Blaze, ABC, CBS, NBC, and PBS to discuss terrorism and current events, as well as how closely his novels of international intrigue parallel the real threats facing the world today. Brad, welcome to our podcast.
It's great to be back with you, Fred. Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. Well, let me say this. Shadow of Doubt may be the best Brad Thor thriller I have read.
Wow. Wow.
And you know I've read them all.
I know. You're that is high praise indeed. Particularly as that's my goal. I'm the son of a United States Marine. My mom was a flight attendant, and I had that Midwestern upbringing that said, "Don't ever phone it in. And if you're going to be a broom pusher, you be the best damn broom pusher there ever was. So keep raising that bar, which is what I try to do. So that's incredible praise. Thank you, Fred.
Okay, Harvath, this is your 24th.
24th book overall, 23rd Harvath book, because I did one year I wrote two books. One was a spin-off series about an all-female Delta Force team called the Athena Project. So this is my 23rd Harvath, and I think I've said this on your show before, but just to re-level set for any new listeners or viewers, I tell people that my thrillers are like the James Bond movies. If the new Bond film is in your local theater, you can go see it even if you've never seen a Bond movie before. You're not going to be left out. You're not going to be confused. So my books are the same way. If you've never read a Brad Thor thriller before, you can start today with Shadow of Doubt. That's totally okay.
Well, you read one Brad Thor thriller, you become a fan for life, which is what I'm always putting out on social media, Brad. But tell our audience about Shadow of Doubt. Let me say this is a spy story.
Yeah. It is. And so a lot of things went into this. I pride myself on knowing a lot and leaving space that I might not know everything. And I really am fascinated. My kids joke around with me and they pick this up off some meme on the internet that once you hit middle age as a father, you have two choices. You can either get deeply involved in smoking meats or you can become a fan of World War II history. They tease me all the time. They're like, "So what's it going to be? The new Eric Larson book, or do you want a big green egg for Christmas? You got to pick one or the other, Dad." And I'll tell you, one of the things that I think is one of the greatest legacies that came out of World War II was the creation uh, of NATO, the greatest military alliance in the history of the world. If you know anything about the history of the European continent, I mean, it's just been soaked in blood forever, just war after war after war. And NATO stopped that. And it's been an amazing, like I said, the most incredible, the most successful military alliance in history. Now, I went to school in Paris. I did a semester there my junior year, and I didn't know something about NATO. And what I didn't know was that NATO used to be headquartered in Paris.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah. So behind the Arc de Triomphe, a couple of blocks behind it, is a building shaped like the letter A, and it was built to represent the alliance. Well, the president of France was quite big for his britches. He wanted to sit at the grown-ups table with Britain and the United States, and thought France deserved that position to be on equal footing in NATO. And the Brits and the Americans didn't agree. And so Charles de Gaulle actually started playing the hokey pokey with NATO, where he kept one foot in and he took one foot out. And he started separating France in their military obligations from those which he was bound to keep under NATO. And the long and the short of it is, we pulled all of our air bases from France and we moved the headquarters to Brussels, where the headquarters remain today outside Brussels. So that's a very interesting tidbit that I didn't know about. And I thought, oh, that might be interesting to explore a little bit further. So I was doing some reading, obviously, before writing this book, and I didn't know about the Sapphire affair that happened in the 1960s under JFK. And for those who are listening or watching that don't know what the Sapphire affair is, America had a huge intelligence coup. We had this massive Russian come over and defect to the United States, and he had a really hot piece of intel. And that hot piece of intel was, now this is not book stuff. This is real life, was that the French government and particularly the French military intelligence apparatus was shot through with Soviet spies. It also turned out that there was a Soviet spy inside the NATO headquarters itself. And the Russians would brag privately, the Soviets, that they could get their hands on any piece of intelligence, even if it was the most sensitive material, within 24 hours, because they had so penetrated NATO. And in fact, the Russians were pulling so much intel out of NATO that they didn't even record the documents with Cyrillic. They actually started using the document names and numbers that were on them from NATO. So it's just amazing. So this presented a real big problem for Kennedy. In what he ended up doing, because he didn't know who he could trust. The CIA couldn't trust any of their counterparts over in France. So Kennedy wrote a letter to the president of France, chose one of his most trusted aides, sent him over to Paris, and said, you hand this to him personally. You stand there while the French president reads this. Then you take the letter back and come back with the letter to the United States. And so the French president read it. He sent a couple of intel officers who he trusted to meet with the Russian defector. And then they figured out, wow, this is a really big issue. We have a big problem on our hands. So now, jumble all that in the head of a thriller writer. And I watched the Brits leave Brexit. And a lot of people don't know how Macron has kind of bulked up France's position on the continent, as he wants France to be the military heavyweight now that the Brits have Brexited. And the French, they don't publicize a lot of it. They've been sending a lot of equipment to Ukraine because they want the Ukrainian military to feel comfortable with, to be knowledgeable with, and become dependent upon French military equipment. They also have a lot of advisors over there because the Ministry of Defense in France is really smart. They realize that this drone warfare, where the Ukrainians are dropping grenades into tank turrets and stuff like that, is going to be the future of the modern battlefield, and they want the
Right.
French to be on the cutting edge. So I said, okay, how do I take all of this stuff, some of this fun stuff, the Hitchcock movie that was called Topaz, based on the Sapphire Affair. It was also a great book in the 70s by Leon Uris, who was a great thriller writer, and it was called Topaz. And I said, how do I kind of give this an update? And I said, all right, I know what I'm going to do. So the opening of Shadow of Doubt is, there's a high ranking Russian intelligence agent that defects from northern Russia into Norway, and the Norwegian intelligence service takes him over. Next
I
chapter.
love that character, by the
Oh,
way.
Gretchko. Yeah, he was a lot of fun. I introduced him in last year's book, which you don't need to have read to enjoy Shadow of Doubt. I'm glad you liked it. So I've got Gretchko defects to Norway. I have a French intelligence officer who stumbles upon the fact that his agency, as well as multiple other arms of the French government, are shot through right now with Russian spies. He doesn't know who he can trust, so he sets up a meeting the next morning for breakfast. He's been trying to figure this out the whole weekend, who he's going to talk to, and he decides he's going to reach out to the CIA station chief in Paris, who he has a good relationship with, and he dies before he can get to that meeting. And
That's a great, great, great chapter.
did you like that? That's good. I'm glad.
Yes.
I'm
I was
glad.
on the edge of my seat reading that one, my friend.
Well, it's funny. And the other thing is, the United States government wants my protagonist, Scott Harvath, to come in and piece all the pieces together. And, but to do so, he would have to spy on his fiance. who's a Norwegian intelligence service operative, and he says no. So the CIA ends up blackmailing Harvath. He was involved in something morally ambiguous in another book, and they decide to turn it against him. What's fun, I've put that chapter out, chapter one, about the killing of the French intelligence officer. So I'm going to give a little spoiler here, but it's done with an ice axe. And I want to tell you, Fred, why I use the ice axe. Several
I
years
was going to ask you that.
it's actually pretty neat. So several years ago, I had dinner with a gentleman by the name of Chris Costa, who's the director of the International Spy Museum in DC. And I like to
Great
ask,
place, by the
oh,
way.
yeah, for anyone who hasn't been there, it is the coolest museum. And I asked Chris, I said, Chris, what's the most unusual, one of the most unusual things you have in the collection? And he said, well, Brad, we have the ice axe that when Stalin sent assassins to kill Trotsky in Mexico City back, I think it was 48, he said, we actually have the ice axe that was used to kill Trotsky. And I thought, oh, wow. Someday I'm going to do that in a book and have somebody go, huh, that's the same way Trotsky was killed. So that's why there's an ice axe in chapter one of Shadow of Doubt.
Well, that chapter was just riveting to me. I wanted to know what was going to happen, and I stopped, and I'm thinking, I got to finish this before I go to bed. And that scene was amazing. And I love the investigative liaison kind of turf battles. It reminds me of doing battle with all the different alphabet soup agencies back in the day when I was an agent. So you really, really, really nailed that as well.
Well, thank you. And it's that was part of the fun with this, particularly down to I wanted to introduce someone using this new surveillance technology that's assisted by AI. And this was happening in Paris, and I kind of crossed my fingers and got on Google. And I'm like, I know the French, they don't have this. They're not using this technology, but let me just look and see. And it turned out that because of the Olympics coming, France did decide to adopt this really cutting edge technology, but they had to rewrite their own privacy laws and suspend certain laws just for the duration of the Olympics. And they tested out, just like I say in the book, they tested out the technology back in March during a Depeche Mode concert where they put up signs and everybody knew that if you walked into the concert, you were facial recognition, gait recognition. I mean, they were doing all this stuff. So everybody who went to the concert knew that they were part of a kind of a test pool. But that was really cool to use that too, because right now, as you and I are recording this podcast, everybody's being scanned. Anything that moves is being scanned and tracked in Paris right now. It's a fabulous investigative tool, and it's also a scary tool when it comes to protecting privacy. It's a tightrope.
We'll get back to the conversation in just a moment. But first, I wanted to let you all know that there's an easy way to stay informed about ONTIC's upcoming events and new resources. Subscribe to our monthly newsletter to get updates sent directly to your inbox. Join the 20,000 plus security professionals who are already receiving these insights and sign up today. The link to subscribe is in the episode description. Shadow of doubt, though, Brad, to me, when you look at Harvath, he seems a little bit different in this book. There appears to be a sophistication with him, and then that conflict that he's faced with wanting to spy on his girlfriend. To me, is just fascinating. It's kind of like the dark world, all wrapped up in exactly how like the espionage world works.
Yeah, it was an interesting choice.